Welcome to the Chess Angle. This is not your typical chess podcast. If you're an amateur or club-level player, the Chess Angle is for you. Our content is aimed at busy adults who are serious about the game but have limited study time. Featured guests include both amateur and titled players alike. And now, here's your host, Director of the Long Island Chess Club, Neil Bellon.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. A reminder, if you have a question or a comment or a topic idea for the podcast, anything at all, you want to put your 2 cents in, please email us info@thechessangle.com. Once again, info@thechessangle.com. You can also go on our website and click the contact link, or you can leave a voicemail as well. So when you go to our website, on the bottom right, you'll see a microphone icon. You click on it, you leave a voice message. Very simple, very low friction. We've had a few of those already. I'm hoping to get some more. And don't worry, it's not the type of thing that you only have one take, so you can re-record as many times as you want. Basically, you record the voice message, and it'll say, like, do you want to redo it? So don't worry, it's not going to submit automatically. So if you get a little tongue-tied, no worries. Whether you email us or message us through the website or leave a voice message on the website, we would love to hear from you, since the listener mailbag is an active part of the show. And speaking of which, let's see what you had to say this week.
You've got mail.
Our first message is from Eric. He says, "Hey Neil, I really like the podcast. I'm 28 years old from Norway. I started playing chess 3 years ago and my ELO is 1300. My problem is that I have dyslexia and that hinders my studies. Do you know of any audiobooks that you could recommend? Hope you win your next game, Eric." Well, thanks so much, Eric, for your email. Glad you're enjoying the podcast. Now, as far as audiobooks, I looked into this a little bit. I did kind of a cursory search. I didn't really do a deep dive, but as far as audiobooks for chess improvement, I really didn't find much. However, I saw a few books on Amazon that were more about chess history, that type of thing, but I really didn't find a lot of instructional chess audiobooks. Again, that was after kind of a cursory search. If anyone listening knows of something, feel free to message me and we can pass along the information. But thanks so much, Eric, for your email. Next, we have a message from Mo. He says, "Hi, Neil. My name is Mo, and my USCF rating is 1892. I love your podcast and have listened to all episodes, especially the ones dealing with the opening. Before I started listening to your podcast, I decided to have an opening repertoire, and after a lot of searches on many platforms, I settled on the London system, the French defense, and the Nimzo Indian. I was very happy and encouraged when I found out that's what you recommended. I belong to a chess club, the Southern Knights, in the southern suburbs of Pittsburgh, which I think will make a great podcast for your show. The club has no dues, no membership, and no place of our own. We meet at the public library. They give us our own room. On Wednesdays at 11 a.m., on Sundays and Thursdays, we meet at a local mall at 10 a.m. Everybody is welcome. About 75% of us are retired professionals. We have engineers, doctors, architects, lawyers, plumbers, mailmen, etc. When we meet, we usually get about 16 to 20 players. We were featured in a local magazine, the Mount Lebanon magazine. If you read the article, you will get a good idea about our club. Here's a link." And Mo included a link. I checked it out. Well, thanks so much, Mo, for your email. I'm glad you're enjoying the podcast. The chess club sounds great. Let me just go back to your first paragraph about the podcast, and I'll talk about your club a little bit. So you said you like all the episodes, especially the ones dealing with the opening. I'm finding that to be very true. It's interesting you said that. Everybody is, I don't want to say obsessed with openings, but everybody likes hearing about that. I mean, it's funny. I'll do a solo episode like on the London system or the Nimzo or something like that, and that actually gets more downloads than an interview episode I did with a titled player. And that's not some humble brag or me patting myself on the back. It's just interesting how people just can't get enough information on openings. So I have had some episodes that were more like human interest. I don't do too many of those on the podcast, but episodes where I interviewed somebody and a lot of it was about their contribution and what they've done with maybe a bit of chess improvement sprinkled in. Some of those were great episodes, great interviews, and yet they're some of my lowest downloads, I guess, because it wasn't pure instruction. And as far as your repertoire, yeah, that's pretty much my repertoire. Now, you say you play the Nimzo against D4. I'm curious what you do, because remember, Nimzo is D4, knight F6, C4, E6, knight C3. But if white does something else after D4, you have to go in a different direction. So I'm curious what you use. And I will say to everybody, that is my repertoire. I've shared that, but just because that's my repertoire, I don't want to convey a sense of, well, that's the only thing you should play. Of course not. I'm simply sharing on this podcast. I'm not telling. That repertoire works for me based on my experience, based on my understanding of the game, based on the types of positions I like playing, based on my style, based on my personality. There's a lot of factors. Like, I played the French defense against 1E4. Everybody knows that. For somebody else, for a number of reasons, that may not work. Something like the Caro-Kann or the Sicilian or a symmetrical response might work better for them. To each his own. So it works for me. I'm glad it's working for you as well. But as I always say, as long as you have a consistent opening repertoire that's giving you playable middle games on a regular basis, you're good to go. Now, as far as your club, yeah, it's funny. I said you guys meet on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. and I was like, all right, well, people work. But then I saw that you said about 75% of you are retired. Yeah, we have clubs like that around us as well. It's mostly for seniors. They meet similar to you, like 10 in the morning, 11 in the morning on a weekday. So obviously those of us working can't go, but we do have a few of those on Long Island, and they usually are held at libraries, which are great venues for chess. The rooms are usually nice, well lit. They have nice tables, parking, restrooms. It sounds like a really cool thing that you have there. You say you get about 16 to 20 players. That's typical. Hopefully it'll be more. Now, as far as me doing a separate episode about the club, I don't know if that's going to work. I mean, I'll kick it around, but I'm not quite sure that's going to fit. But this sounds like a great club. Sounds like you guys are having a good time. And that's what it's all about, because there really is nothing like over the board chess. So I appreciate your email, Mo. Thank you. So this week, I want to circle back to study plans. And I say circle back because that's kind of a theme on this podcast. Like, there are certain recurring themes because we talk about different things in chess, but we're really about over the board amateur tournaments and improvement. So study plans certainly are a recurring theme. Openings are a recurring theme. Chess psychology, chess improvement as a busy adult. These are things we circle back to. And this week's going to be a little bit of a thought experiment, if you will. I'm going to kind of be thinking out loud, sharing some random thoughts about study plans. So this is more sharing, not telling. I mean, that's pretty much true for everything. I know I offer opinions and give advice, but remember, I'm just one person. Don't just, please don't just go by me. And I share my experiences as a player and a tournament director and as someone who was struggling as a tournament player for a while when I first started. So it kind of took me a while. Other people kind of improve and become competent tournament players a lot quicker. So I'm basing most of what I say on my own experiences, my own opinions. But again, I'm sharing, I'm not telling. There are very few things on this podcast where I would be more kind of telling instead of sharing. So just keep that in mind. I am but one person just giving my own humble opinion on this stuff. And I just want to mention something as an aside, because I said I did several episodes on study plans. On our website, thechessangle.com, there is a search feature, which is great. I use it myself. If you look at the top navigation bar, it's a little magnifying glass, typical search icon for websites. But what's great is that if you're looking for a specific episode, you can put in a keyword and it'll show up. I actually do that for myself because, we're getting to the point now, there's enough episodes. I have to remind myself, like, wait, did I talk about this? Did I do a quick episode on this? Did I mention this as part of an episode? That type of thing. So if you look up study plans, you're going to see there's at least probably 6 or 7 episodes where I touched upon this. That's why I said we're circling back to it. The 2 previous episodes I did, which go along with this one the most, and the 2 previous episodes that I guess I'm the most proud of and that got a big response from listeners as far as downloads, were episode 61, Do Chess Training Programs Work?, where I talked about a lot of these formal chess programs, whether it's online or otherwise, and whether they actually work for adults. Some thoughts on that. I'm going to come back to that this week as well. And also episode 105, which was called Declutter Your Chess Study Plan. I got a lot of positive feedback for that one. And what I argue in that episode was that, number one, there's so much chess material out there that you really don't need, or that's too difficult for many developing players. And number two, you really don't need that many things. You don't need that many study resources to improve at the game. You don't need to run out and buy like 100 books and 100 courses, things like that. You're better off getting fewer things and focusing on those, more thoroughly than kind of loosely studying a large number of things more superficially. So that's what I argue in that episode. I will throw links in the show description for both of those, episode 61 and episode 105, so you don't have to go searching for it. But again, keep in mind that search feature on the website. So if you want to come back to something, you can just put in a keyword and it'll show you any episodes where I discussed that particular topic. And like I said, I even do that myself now just to remind myself, because I sometimes forget things that I may have mentioned previously. All right, so let's get to some specific ideas and talking points regarding study plans. I'm going to jump around a little bit. Now, the first thing I want to mention, I've spoken about before on the pod. It's an adult improver meme that was on Reddit, and I'm going to read it now. It sort of pokes fun at the whole adult improver culture out there. And it says, how to cope with playing an adult improver. I have a chess tournament in 6 days, and I anticipate getting paired with an adult improver. I can picture them sitting across the board from me before the game, smugly reviewing their 5-year study plan, book hierarchy, and Lee chess opening statistics. How can I cope with this and maybe even accept it? All right, that's great. Longtime listeners, I apologize because I mentioned this before, but it's obviously a play on the idea that, most people at tournaments, they're worried about playing a kid or like an annoying opponent. So, they're poking fun at the adult improvers. It's all in good fun because a lot of them really are into these very formal study plans. A lot of them will post them on Reddit or on social media or on X or Twitter, although X seems to be slowly withering away. I don't know, maybe it's just me. I'm not a power user on X or Twitter. I'm more of a post and ghost type of guy. But anyway, it seems to be less active than it used to be. Maybe that's just my perception. I don't know. I'm not on it enough to really know. But anyway, a lot of players will post their study plans and things like that. They'll even have a spreadsheet. So I just thought that was a funny meme just to kick things off. Now, I will say this. If you want to get better, obviously you need to study and play on a regular basis. All right. No one's saying that you can really cut corners and that you can't do any work. On the other hand, I don't believe that you need to put in 6, 7, 8 hours a day in order to get better. And that's really not practical for most of us. But my main point is this. Those formal, quote unquote, those really formal chess study plans where they're really detailed and really specific. Well, I'm going to spend 20 minutes doing tactics and then, 37 minutes on the middle game and then 12 minutes analyzing, that whole thing. Those formal chess study plans, I believe, are not practical. Now, the target audience for this discussion is busy adults who have a full-time job, family and household responsibilities, that type of thing. Now, if you're in a situation where, for whatever reason, you have an inordinate amount of time to spend on chess, there could be a variety of reasons for that. Maybe you're retired, maybe you're independently wealthy. I don't know. Whatever your situation is, then this episode may not apply as much to you because you have the time to do it. But for those of you, again, working full-time, family, household responsibilities, all that stuff, you just have a busy life in general, which is most of our listeners. That's who this is for. So just to give some context as far as the target audience for this discussion. Now, before we get back to chess specifically in these formal study plans and whether they're practical, it reminds me of these like power morning routines, which is all the rage now, right? All these like productivity hacks and how I start my day, right? You know what I'm talking about. Oh, I wake up at 4 a.m., I journal for a half hour, then I meditate, then I go for an ice cold swim, and then I work, that whole thing. In my opinion, what most people don't appreciate, this is just my perception, what a lot of those authors or bloggers, I don't know, whoever they are, with these power morning routines, what they don't tell you, because there's always what they tell you and what they don't tell you. What they don't tell you is that most of them don't work a traditional day job. And a lot of what they suggest is extremely difficult to implement into your life if you're 9 to 5ing it. Again, that's just my perception. Now, you want to know what my power morning routine is? Waking up in the morning. Yeah, that's it. Waking up, doing whatever drop-offs I need to and getting to work on time. That's my power morning routine. Okay. I mean, I'm already up at 5:45 as it is. I'm up early. I have to be at work early. So there's no way I could do anything like that. I mean, if I were, I don't know, if I had to be at work later, if I were getting up at 7 or 8, maybe, but with my schedule, I'm up at 5:45. So what am I going to get up at like 3 in the morning? Like, it's just not. So yeah, my morning routine is simply getting up and getting to work on time. There you go. Now, along this whole productivity thing, I'm just going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole here. I listened to the Deep Questions podcast with Cal Newport. I'm guessing many of you do as well, or you may know who he is. He's an author as well. I've read about 3 of his books. Now, I really do like Cal Newport. I think he's excellent. I listen to it every week. I really like his podcast. Like I said, I read a few of his books. But if I have to nitpick, he's a good example of someone giving productivity advice who doesn't work a 9 to 5 job. And he comes off a little bit elitist, almost pretentious at times. Now, he has an academic schedule. He is a computer science professor, and, he's also an author. And, he talks about how he writes every morning. Oh, I write every morning. And he talks about how, because he's not working over the summer, how he can take more time to work on projects. But as I'm listening to this, most people do not have, that kind of time. Most people are working a day job. They don't have the summers off. So I sometimes think that Deep Questions podcast is aimed at a very specific elite audience in some ways. I don't know. And then some of the things he says about time blocking and this and that, I just think are impractical at times. Like, I do roll my eyes a little bit at what he says, but I do like him. I do like Cal Newport. I really like listening to him. He does have some great ideas, but I think some of his productivity suggestions are a little impractical and over the top. So I would leave it at that. I really like him, but there's a few things where I kind of question and shake my head a little bit. That's true for most people. I'm sure there are things I say where people shake their head. I mean, that's going to be everybody. But I do like Cal Newport. I think he has a lot of valuable things to offer. Moving on, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back in just a moment. Now, one thing that's interesting, and in the interest of fairness, I just want to mention this. When I look at my rating trajectory over the years, there were times when I was playing well, my rating was increasing, and I really wasn't doing much studying just because of other things going on in my life. I mean, there could be a number of reasons for that, but I think we all go through periods where we're not putting as much into the game as we want as far as study and prep, and yet we're still doing well. So a lot of it is mindset and chess psychology. The next thought I have about this is that we have a lot of newer players at the club. And most of them, they're young, they're in their early 20s. Most of them are coming from playing online. Really, really nice guys. They're all doing well, and their over-the-board ratings are increasing. And a bunch of us were talking at the club one night. So everyone's game had finished, and there's this little lobby area. So it was myself and I forgot who was with me, someone else around my age. And then there were like 3 or 4 of these young 20-somethings. And we're talking, and we started getting into like YouTube and studying and chess resources. And those of us who are a bit older, we're just talking about like books and things we've read. And for these younger guys, their study plan, their quote unquote study plan was basically, yeah, I just watch YouTube videos. I mean, that was pretty much it. They play online and they watch YouTube videos. They didn't really get into books or courses or anything. And yet they're doing well. This is their maybe second, third, fourth tournament. They're already like 14, 15, 1600 around there. They're drawing higher rated opponents in some cases. And they were saying, yeah, it's just pretty much watching YouTube. They mentioned Daniel Naroditsky. That was a favorite among them. One of them was like, yeah, I have Naroditsky in my head when I play. And I just thought it was very interesting because someone coming from my generation where it's like, you need a lot of over the board experience, which is true, but you have to read books also. This was strictly watching YouTube, strictly playing online, and yet they were doing very well. They're improving on a regular basis. Now, maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe that's just how things are now. But I just thought it was an interesting commentary on how players such as these are, again, just watching YouTube and playing online and doing very well as far as improvement. Now, it's interesting. Over a long period of time, will their improvement stop? Is it going to plateau? Are they going to have continued improvement and go even further? That would be an interesting kind of long-term study to look at. But it was a very, very fascinating conversation about how these younger guys approach chess study to someone my age. And there's definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach. Next thing, and I'm coming back to this because I've mentioned this before on the pod, are these online chess study programs or these online chess academies or these online chess training programs that are out there. Couple of thoughts there. Most of them are behind a paywall, so you're not really doing it for free. And they tend to be very regimented depending on your level. You have to read a certain number of books or play a certain number of games or analyze your games, do puzzles, whatever it is. And, I will say, anecdotally, I've heard a lot of positive things about these programs. They seem to help a lot of players. But also anecdotally, and this is why I'm mentioning these training programs, I personally believe a lot of players who aren't improving in those programs, it's not the programs themselves, it's because they're really not doing the work and cutting corners. And you got to remember, all chess improvement suggestions are anecdotal. Everything is anecdotal. You can't say for sure, well, this method of studying is definitely going to work, or this course is definitely going to help. To say that a specific chess improvement approach works, what you really need, and not to get too formal because I'm not really qualified to talk about this, but you need randomized controlled experiments, right? Where you have a control group and an experimental group. Like that's the most sound form of studying something. Like, for example, we all have heard of the woodpecker method, right? That's where you take a series of tactical puzzles and then you do that same group of puzzles over and over at a faster rate each time. So you have X amount of time to finish it the first round through, then you do them again in a shorter amount of time, then again in an even shorter amount of time, that type of thing. But to say, oh yeah, that method works, or any method, I'm just using the woodpecker as an example, you would have to have, again, a randomized controlled experiment. That's how you're really going to know what works and how you can make more definitive statements. So you would have a control group that would study what they normally do, and then the experimental group would focus just on the woodpecker method, and then over a period of time, you would compare. Because that's the only way you're going to know. You have to have a control group where, you're studying a group of people who aren't using it versus those who are, because if you simply say to one group of people, we want all of you to study the woodpecker method, and you see some improvement, the problem is without a control group, you don't know if the improvement is because of the woodpecker method or in spite of it. Would they have gotten better anyway, even if they didn't do the woodpecker method? That's why you need a control group. That's the whole point of randomized controlled experiments. You need one group that doesn't use it and one group that does, and you got to follow both. Okay. So again, for those of you who are researchers out there, like, forgive me if I messed up the terminology or something, but I think you get the idea. To really know if something works, like a specific chess improvement tool, because there are definitely studies about playing chess in general, but if you really want to know if a specific chess improvement tool works, you have to have formal studies and experiments to look into that. The next thought I have is about how to fit study time into your busy life. Now, it's funny. I'm going to talk a little bit about how the sausage is made for this podcast. I'll sometimes have a thought for either a part of an episode or an entire episode, and then I'll start outlining it or I'll start recording it, and I'm just like, no, this is stupid, or I'm just like, no, this isn't working, or I'll have an idea for an episode, and after like 4.5 minutes, I've said everything I needed to on it, or I'll have something that I think is going to be like a 6-minute segment in an episode, and I end up talking about that for 45 minutes, and that becomes a standalone. Like it's very hard to tell how it's going to play out once you're actually in front of the microphone, right? It's like if you're a musician or a performer, right? You can rehearse all you want. Once you're out on stage, like you don't know what's going to happen, right? So I was going to do a whole thing on how to fit study time into your busy life, but then I'm like everybody knows this. Like you just have to do it when you can because you don't know what's going to come up. That's kind of why I was sort of poking fun at the whole time blocking thing with Cal Newport, because like you can time block all you want, but then what if something comes up? You're gonna say, oh, sorry, no, I can't take you to the emergency room because I time blocked for this thing. Things happen in life. So my advice, you do it when you can. This is part of the reason why I don't think formal chess study plans are practical, because it's very, very difficult to stick to it. I mean, unless you have a very quiet and non-busy life. Maybe you're at that point in your life. Maybe you're in that space right now. But for most of us who are very busy, the formal chess study plans aren't going to work. You might stick to it for like 2 or 3 days, but then as soon as you get off of it and you're not able to stick to it, you get frustrated. It's kind of like if you say you're going to start going to the gym and you work out again, you might go for like 2, 3, 4 days. And then what happens? Or maybe even more, maybe you have a steady thing going on for like 2, 3 weeks. You go into the gym every day, and then what happens? Something happens, you don't go this day. And then all of a sudden you don't go there. And all of a sudden it's like a week went by and you didn't go to the gym and you get really frustrated. That's what happens when you have a formal chess study plan, which is why I believe in the expression, you may have heard this, planning is guessing. That's one of my favorite quotes. Planning is guessing, right? Man plans, God laughs. Like you'll plan on doing something, but you're guessing. All right, this weekend on Saturday, I'm going to spend an hour. You don't know what's going to come up. You don't know what's going to happen. So that's why I say planning is guessing. What I'm going to speak about later, rather than having like a formal study plan as far as like blocking it out, as long as you know what material you're going to use, you can study it at your own pace when you can. I'll explain that more specifically in just a moment, but I want to make one more comment before I do, which is the past few months or so, I have not been studying consistently. Life's been getting in the way, and that happens, and that's not a complaint. I like my life, but just, work, family, lot going on, a lot of things coming up, a lot of commitments. And the reason I'm saying that is I sometimes think people think like, well, he runs a club, he hosts a chess podcast, he probably has this like crazy, wicked study plan and he's putting in all this time. And I'm really not. I have the same struggles that you do. I deal with busyness and things that come up just like you do. So I really don't. I mean, I'll go days or even longer, sometimes weeks. Like I said, the past few months, I really have not been studying consistently at all. It's been very piecemeal. So I go through dry spells too when life gets in the way, which is why I have what I call an at the board approach. So what do I mean by an at the board approach? The one thing I do have in my favor, and I know not everybody is in this situation, I do have my over the board game once a week. And even then it's not always once a week because sometimes I have to take buys, but I do know that for the most part, I have my over the board game that I look forward to every week. I also play 5-minute chess online. I've been really getting back into 5-minute blitz games, which by the way is going to be a separate discussion in a future episode. That's one of those things I spoke about previously, but I'm going to come back to. But what do I mean by this at the board approach? What I mean by that is when I'm sitting at the board at an over the board tournament, I really get into it. I really focus. I really take it seriously. And I bring this sort of this psychological, I don't want to say preparation, but I just really bring this focus and this desire to do well when I'm actually playing my game. So that way, regardless of how much I did or didn't study that week, I know I'm just going to give it everything I've got. And if I lose, I lose. That's something to think about. And it's the whole argument, is chess psychology and your outlook and your desire to win the game, is that just as or even more important than how much chess theory you know? Very interesting thing to think about. But that's what's gotten me through some games. I mean, I've beaten higher rated players when I've been in sort of a studying slump, just because I had the right attitude at the board. And again, it's a little bit easier for me at this point because I've been playing a long time. So that's one of the advantages of experience, is that, you can get away with these periods where you're not studying as much because you've been doing it a long time. If you're more of a developing player and you don't have too much experience, maybe you're playing in just, your second or third or fourth tournament, this is going to be a little bit harder to implement that sort of like at the board mental approach. I mean, you can still do it, certainly. And the other thing that helps with that at the board approach, which is something I say like a broken record, I do have my set opening repertoire. So I know I don't need to like review openings that week. Like if I didn't get to it, it doesn't matter because I know I have my opening. So I don't worry about that. As long as I can get to a middle game that's playable where I'm at least equal, I'm good to go. So whenever I go through periods where I'm not studying consistently, I just keep that in mind. Now, the advantage of times where you are studying consistently, you do feel a little bit more prepared. It does give you a little bit of a confidence boost. But what I'm saying is I'm at a point now where I try to not think about that if I haven't been working on my game as much as I want to. So a little bit of a long-winded explanation there, but I think the way to summarize that is your outlook and your attitude and your belief that you can do well, regardless of how good your opponent is just tremendously huge. So now let's talk about what my current study plan is, which I'm slowly getting back to. It's been a little choppy, like I said, even though the amount of time I put into it might be a little bit haphazard. As far as what materials I'm using at any given time, that I have set. So I think it's good to have a quote unquote formal study plan, with the formal part, being what you're going to study, like knowing which materials you're going to use. The informal part would be how much time you can put into it. Because again, if you have a study plan where you say, I'm going to do X amount of studying per day and I'm going to stick to it, that can be tough to stick to. Now, I will say this. There are people, and I know some of you listening probably fit in this category, where, yeah, you're doing the whole thing, full-time job, family, and yet you're still finding the time to study every day because you have the discipline to do it. That's awesome. Like those people I really look up to, and those people I really honor. For me, I know it's not going to happen, because even if I have the time to do it, there is some nights where I'm so mentally drained and I'm so tired that if I try to study chess productively, it's just going to be a waste. Other people fight through that. And some of you might say, oh, you're just making excuses. Maybe that's true, but I'm just being honest, like, because I definitely don't do it every day, at least for, certain times. There are certain times of the year that are less busy for me than others where I can put more time in. It's probably true for you as well. We all have busy periods and maybe periods where it's less busy, but the people who stick to a plan like that, no matter what, I have tremendous respect for those people. I have tremendous respect for that discipline, because, I don't have that. If I need to skip a day, I'm going to skip a day. Just very interesting how different people approach it. But anyway, here is my current study plan. Now, I want to mention Noel Studer. He's a GM from Switzerland, I believe. He mentioned a way of organizing your study plan in a very simple, non-complicated way. And when I heard it, I was like, that's almost exactly what I do. Like it was kind of cool to see that what I do was very, very similar to his. So what he says, he feels you should have three sort of sections, like three areas that you're focusing on, or three phases of your study plan, whatever you want to use. And he says the first should be playing and analyzing your games. The second should be working on tactics. And the third should be like one other thing or resource, like one other sort of thing you're working on. It could be a book. It could be an opening. It could be a course. It could be an endgame thing. So playing and analyzing your games, tactics, and like one other resource or aspect of the game. And I think that's pretty good. Mine is close, except for the tactics part. Like I do study tactics, but not as a separate entity or not as a separate lane. Like my 3 sections are playing and analyzing your game. So I agree with Noel Studer there. And understand, as far as playing and analyzing your games, that's like a rock for me. I'll argue that you can see a lot of improvement just from that alone, from playing and from analyzing your games with an engine. So I agree with him there. Now, his second bracket, so to speak, is studying tactics. That I don't do. What I do is I double up on his third thing. So mine is playing and analyzing your games, and then I do one other thing or resource, and then I do a second thing or resource. So just to be clear, Noel Studer's 3 things are play and analyze your games, tactics, and like one other resource or aspect of the game. I do play and analyze your games and then 2 different resources for my thing. So in other words, instead of his tactics, number 2, I'm replacing it with like a second resource, which generally tactics may be a part of. So very similar. Maybe I'm splitting hairs too much, but my current study plan is as follows. So number 1, yeah, I always play and analyze my games. That's not going anywhere. And then the 2 resources I'm using now, and it's kind of sad because I think I mentioned this a while ago. I still haven't gotten through it because like I said, I'm kind of still going through a little bit of a dry spell over the past few months study-wise. But the first thing I'm doing is a chess.com lesson called Build Your Technique by F.M. Thomas Wolski. I know I mentioned that previously. I still haven't finished it. I went through the whole thing many, many years ago when it was like on CD-ROM, and I'm working my way through it again now. And even as a stronger player, I'm still getting a lot out of it. And Build Your Technique, if you're rated like 1,000, you could use it. If you're rated like 2,000, you can use it. It kind of runs the whole gamut, but I'm really, really enjoying it. I'll throw a link in the show notes in case anybody wants to look at it. And then the second thing I'm doing, believe it or not, you guys are going to throw things at me for saying this. I am rereading The Amateur's Mind, but I'm doing the Chessable version, which I have to say is really, really nice. And just for thoroughness, that is an unsolicited endorsement. I paid for it with my own money. I used to have a relationship with Chessable. I don't anymore. So again, this is just my own personal endorsement. I paid for it myself. The Chessable version of The Amateur's Mind is quite good. I bought the video too, but I haven't really looked at it. I'm just looking at the main instruction, and they really did a great job. They preserved pretty much all of the text from the original. They have all the variations. I mean, it's really nice studying a chess book in a course like that rather than having to read it and set up the position yourself. Like everything's there, the board, all the variations. It's really, really nice. I started it a while back, and then, like I said, I just got distracted with other things. So getting through these 2 things that I mentioned, the chess.com lesson and the Amateur's Mind on Chessable, it's going to take me a while, but I'm enjoying it. And hopefully things will ease up a bit soon and I can spend some more time on it. That's my current study plan. You know, playing and analyzing my games, the Build Your Technique lesson on chess.com and the Amateur's Mind on Chessable. Those are my 3. So very close to Noel Studer's like 3 lanes or 3 sections. I just don't do a separate tactics thing. Now, you may be wondering, as I'm saying this, some of you may be curious, well, why are you not doing a separate lane for tactics? It's a couple of reasons. First of all, and I said this before, and I'm just being honest with myself and with all of you, I actually don't like doing tactical puzzles. I don't know, they're just, I mean, I know you need to do them, but I honestly don't enjoy them. I don't want to spend like an hour or something just doing tactical puzzles. The second thing is because, as I mentioned a few episodes back, in most amateur games, when you have a tactical shot, it's going to be basic tactics rather than advanced tactics. It's going to be, end up being a simple 1 to 3 move combination. Like what's going to happen is your opponent's going to hang a piece and you're going to take it. Or what's going to happen is, this is a very common one, he'll have a pawn protecting, let's say, a knight or a rook, and he will not realize that the pawn protecting it is pinned, right? So let's say the pawn's in front of his king and you have a rook on that file and the knight is on the adjacent file. He will not realize, or she will not realize, that you can take their piece because the pin the pin. The pawn protecting it is pinned. Very, very common. Very, very common. That's one of my favorite tactics. I've won a lot of amateur games that way over the board, where I'll win a piece because the pawn protecting it was pinned. A lot of players miss that. You'd be surprised. So those types of tactics are going to win games, or it's those sort of 3-move combination tactics like you take, he takes, you take, he takes, and then boom, move 3, you have like a winning fork or something like that. Usually those more advanced and very, very tricky, hard to see tactics, 2 things are going to happen. They're either not going to show up in your game, or if they do, both players are going to miss them. All right, you heard me give this speech 2 episodes ago, but that's why I don't study tactics separately. All right, I really don't enjoy it, and most of that advanced stuff you're not going to need. I actually would rather study like the end game or something like that. And it's funny, a lot of people are going to say the opposite, like the end game for them is torture and they'd rather do tactics. But Noel Studer's 3 areas of focus, again, playing and analyzing your games, tactics, and then like one other resource. Mine is playing and analyzing your games and then 2 resources. All right. I replaced the tactics thing with another resource. That works for me. Now, just because I'm saying I do that doesn't mean you need to do that. That's what works for me. But I will say this, I will argue that of those 3, the most important one is playing and analyzing your games. I will end with that, and just know that if you sometimes get frustrated because you're not putting as much time in the game as you'd like to, we all go through that. Welcome to adulting. Welcome to the real world. We all go through it. So I don't let it bother me, because I know going in that's going to happen. And life is good. Remember, it's just a game at the end of the day. You have other things that are and should be more of a priority. We all do this as sort of an ancillary thing for fun. I mean, I know it's more than a hobby for all of us, but I think you get what I'm saying. Know what your priorities are. Very important. So to close this out, just a few reminders. Send in those emails. I definitely want to hear from you. Remember, on the website, you can also send a voice message. Next week's episode, barring any changes, I might have a last minute thing. Sometimes I change the order, but as of right now, at the time of this recording, next week's episode will be on the Jabava London system. Very basic. Don't worry, we're not going to get too complicated. It's a variation of the London system that I've been getting into. Great opening. We're going to talk about that. But at any rate, I really appreciate you listening. I hope I wasn't too sort of babbly and too rabbit holey this week. I know I was kind of speaking extemporaneously a lot this week. Again, this was a little bit of a thought experiment, a lot of my opinions on study plans, but I hope you found the information useful and something to think about. And as always, I hope you win your next game. Have a great day, everybody.